Forced to choose pronouns? Returned/refunded. Completely disappointed in such a AAA release title. I can't even get past the tutorial because the game freezes any time someone starts any dialogue. I have to tab out of the game and then tab back in, and it will say a sentence or two and then freeze again. I have an i7, 3060, and 32 GB of RAM, so this shouldn't be an issue. The best game of 2006. Modders will fix it, is enabling this behavior of releasing half-made games. It's honestly amazing to me that the same people who gave me characters I liked and who are known way beyond the scope of their games made this game and filled it with the absolute most bland characters I've ever seen in a game of this scale. Not a single member of Constellation is interesting. I never once cared about anything they do or are involved in, and I honestly hope at some point Sam is violently depressurized out of an airlock. And that's just the companions, never mind the actual characters in the quests. The people who the game wants you to believe are these cutthroat executives or evil space pirates are barely capable of hurting anyone, it seems. Spoilers from here, but you shouldn't care. If you operate strictly on how it's written, the Crimson Fleet is a group of slightly antagonistic friends who would be more likely to go out shoplifting than raiding and murdering people for their ships. They don't talk or act like a group of notorious pirates should. Hell, through the actions of the player, you can expose some weasel who wants to kill the fleet's boss, and instead of executing him he just lets him go. You can help them fight SysDef, this supposedly elite police force that behaves more like a group of well-armed mall cops, but it hardly matters. I did the Crimson Fleet questline almost right from the start, and I've only seen one group of them in the wild that weren't milling about in abandoned factories or science outposts. I can't tell you about the Rangers or the UC questlines because I got so bored being an inoffensive pirate I just stopped playing. Until the modders can make the game entertaining or something drastic happens to make the story good, I'd avoid this one. Nope. Asked for a refund. The game just looks like ass. Woke crap in it. Not a fan of the skill system. Clunky dialogue and story for what little I played. Not optimized. Bethesda Fast Travel Simulator 2023. Starfield, Bethesda's highly anticipated foray into the cosmos, left me with mixed feelings, along with an all-too-familiar frustration. One notable drawback was the absence of a dedicated exploration vehicle, which hindered immersion in this vast universe. But even beyond that, the heart of the issue was the procedural generation, which did not deliver the unique and meticulously crafted worlds I had anticipated. Instead, I encountered a series of planets that felt eerily similar, like variations on the same theme. Each planet suffered from the same underlying problem, a lack of meaningful content. They all shared a repetitive pattern, few points of interest, different alien species, and not much else. This sameness across the universe resulted in a pervasive feeling of monotony. It became clear that the size and quantity of these generated planets ultimately worked against the game, as they were devoid of anything truly interesting. The concept of planet scanning, which initially sounded intriguing, only exacerbated the issue. It promised the potential for discovery and wonder, but the reality was far from it. The mechanic lacked depth and meaningful rewards, making it feel like a tedious and unrewarding task. The narrative, regrettably, followed a somewhat predictable and formulaic trajectory, failing to captivate with any degree of complexity or intrigue. With planets offering little in the way of engaging content, the story lacked the necessary backdrop to shine. Combat mechanics also fell short of expectations, lacking the fluidity and dynamism I had hoped for, making engagements feel somewhat tedious. My greatest frustration, however, stemmed from the lack of meaningful impact on the story, the environments, or the universe itself. The storytelling felt basic and bland, with my actions appearing to have limited bearing on the outcome, outside of a handful of select dialogue options. In addition, the AI, as usual, left much to be desired, failing to offer the depth and immersion that could have elevated the overall experience. Bethesda's knack for crafting worlds is undeniable, but in the case of Starfield, the sheer size and number of generated planets seemed to work against the game, resulting in a universe that felt eerily repetitive and devoid of anything truly captivating. In essence, Starfield offers an ambitious journey within a universe that lacks the depth, variety, and richness that could have set it apart. This stands out in an era where other RPGs are demonstrating that extensive procedural content, without thoughtful curation, can lead to vast but ultimately uninteresting settings. This game is so hit or miss I'm not sure what to think of it. Part of the time I enjoy it and in other parts I find myself bored and uninterested. The graphics are okay, but the gameplay feels old and I find myself skipping through conversations. The exploration portion of the game is lacking. It's a space game where I don't seem to travel in space. I use the map menu to jump light years away in a single loading screen. I don't take off and land, I just appear and disappear. The in-game economy seems out of whack. To buy a new ship you need a lot of credits, but if you have a ship to sell, forget it. It's not even worth taking it and flying it back to sell it. After registering it you make very little. I mean it's a spacecraft, yet it still has very little value. I often make more money by killing pirates and taking their spacesuits and weapons. That brings me to my next point, and I don't mean this as an insult towards the consoles, but the control appears to be based on that. Total lack of accuracy. Want something placed exactly where you want it? Good luck. Want some angled at an exact point? Good luck. Tap a button for this and hold a button for that is telling me that someone has a lack of buttons. Made for PC? I don't think so. I definitely see how some people could enjoy this game, but I can't recommend it. I should be traveling in space more, grav jumping more, landing and taking off more. Entire galaxies are bypassed via loading screens and much of the gameplay feels at least a decade old. They have the right parts of a space game, they're just put together in the wrong order. The more I play Starfield the smaller it feels. Infinitely smaller than any of Bethesda's previous titles, which is ironic considering the scale of the universe they are attempting to create. For the first time after less than 100 hours I feel like a Bethesda game has nothing new to show me. No reward for wandering off into the far corners of the map, no prospects of anything new beyond what I've experienced beyond level 30. It's a world without a soul and no interesting history within it. Bethesda has always been fantastic at making their worlds feel lived in. They add history to every location, a story to be told. Whether it's an ancient dungeon, a capital city or a car factory that raiders just so happen to take up refuge in. There always seemed to be a reason for these locations to exist aside from simply being for the player to discover. Unfortunately, generated content has taken their biggest strength and stretched it so thin the other cracks in their armor become much more apparent. The interesting, handcrafted overworlds have been turned into vast expanses of boredom, populated only by alien life that wanders aimlessly and dotted with copy and pasted locations on each planet. The reasons for each of these enemies or locations to exist are gone, instead they are placed there based on the algorithm saying this planet needs a predator, and drawing from a handful of randomized creatures to fill the role, or it needs an outpost so it takes the same bio-laboratory you saw on a planet at level 5 and has it appear again at level 50 with higher level enemies. Even the main storyline in the game uses this generated content, which stands out like a sore thumb since the handcrafted locations that are still present are often the highest points of the game. They just feel drowned out in a sea of garbage. The cities, however, are fantastic. It feels like most of the effort was put into making them feel like a large metropolis with loads of side quests, with many being very well written. This is at odds with the main story that borders on the nonsensical. The entire premise of Constellation as an organization doesn't make sense. They claim to be a group that discovers the unknown to find what's out there, yet they seemingly haven't discovered anything in their decades of existence. What do they actually do? They only explore within the settled systems, so they don't go anywhere new. Heck, they haven't even scanned the plants and animals on their home planet, much less anywhere else. The organization only exists for the player to discover new things, so it having existed previously makes zero sense. The entire first act of the game should have been about forming constellation and recruiting people that want to go and find new stuff. The general gameplay elements have definitely been improved on. I can't tell you how nice it is to play a Bethesda title that allows you to grab a ledge and climb up it. The shooting mechanics feel tighter, the traversal is nice, and there are various quality of life improvements. But if we're being honest, these were all mechanics and improvements that have been in games for well over a decade and feels more like catch-up. That being said, there is a ton of recycled content from both Skyrim and Fallout at play. Legendary effects being copy/pasted from Fallout items or Skyrim spells, repurposed dragon shouts as powers, etc. It's a shame that there really isn't much gameplay when you actually explore a planet, or go hunting for artifacts and temples. There are so many locations completely devoid of life, with absolutely nothing interesting going on. Nearly every mine you explore, for example, is unpopulated, or at the most has a few native alien enemies. Once again, they only have a few select layouts that repeat on every planet. I like the space combat and ship utilization. It's simple, sure, but it works well enough and is a nice break from being on the ground all the time. There's nothing groundbreaking going on here. The game shines with ship customization. I've spent hours trying to get my ship just right and make it unique. There are very much improvements to be had that I would love to see though. Being able to preview interiors and choose the locations of ladders and doors would be great. Right now the ship becomes a maze because you don't know where those will end up. Outpost building is a gigantic chore and very frustrating. I adored building settlements in Fallout 4, but the amount of different components needed to create simple items and buildings in Starfield is ludicrous, as is your storage and carry capacity. You find yourself fast traveling constantly to buy a limited amount of a resource you need, because hunting for it is stupidly time-consuming. In Fallout 4, you could just run to the nearest location and grab all the junk you could haul, then store it at the Infinite Workshop storage. That's not the case here, so if you find resources you'll just ignore them. That is, until you need them and have to go 5 minutes out of your way just to find aluminium to build a small habitat. I say all this but am still enjoying chunks of the game because there are still magical bits to the world, stories and mechanics. It really just feels buried beneath a bunch of white noise and failed attempts at refining systems. Overall, despite enjoying the game at points, this feels like a huge regression in Bethesda's strengths and a highlight of their biggest flaws. The improved and refined mechanics only bring it closer to modern counterparts, which is not enough to set it apart. You can find both my first 10 hours and 50 hours impressions here for more, if you are so inclined. Enter ship cutscene, sit down cutscene, launch cutscene, jump to next area in space cutscene, dock at space station cutscene, exit space station cutscene, jump to next planet cutscene, land on planet cutscene, get out of chair cutscene, exit ship cutscene. You may now proceed to walk around the planet. No, there are no ground vehicles, so you have to walk. Have fun. Game is a glorified loading screen. You can't fly to locations in space. This is on top of the combat still being the same left-click spam for melee, and the exact same shooting as Fallout 4, Fallout 3, NV etc. Imagine spending 10 years making this game and calling it your biggest game ever. Good job, Todd. Just let modders fix your game. Again. Oh yeah, the performance is horrible, the textures are trash and there isn't even an FOV slider. Like I said, good job, Todd.